minutes before they are. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, helping you win the water cooler wars. And Mark Taylor-Canfield in Seattle, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Thom, it's good to talk to you again. Seattle is abuzz with the news that Senator Sanders is going to be here tomorrow. But there is a huge issue that obviously won't be a part of the Republican debates, and it's become a part of the focus of my journalism and also a major platform issue for the re-election campaign of our city council member, Shama Sawant. And that is that Seattle has the fastest increasing rents in the country. And we have no rent control in Washington state because it's actually prohibited by our state legislature. But the rents are skyrocketing here with all the corporate development.
Yeah.
One sad example of that is a small business shoe store in Seattle called Angel Shoe Repair, which has been around since 1912, 135 years. Angel's rent was increased by 300%, and he had to move from his building. And I know that this has been a major focus of Senator Sanders' campaign when he was mayor of Burlington, Vermont. But what can be done on the federal level to stop this displacement of an entire population of a city like Seattle, where the middle class and working people just can't afford to live here anymore? Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I don't think you can do anything at the federal level because you're involving yourself. You know, the Constitution clearly says that the federal government can involve itself in economic issues in states, but only when they're involved in interstate commerce. And rent control in Seattle is not interstate commerce. So that seems to me, I mean, I could be wrong on this, but that seems to me like an issue that is most appropriately handled at the state level. And apparently, you know, the fat cats and landlords got there before you did and got that law passed by the state legislature. So I would put all my effort into repealing that law and at the same time, you know, trying to get affordable housing laws in Seattle. I know here in Washington, D.C., you know, gentrification is going full tilt boogie. And there are... Well, actually, there was more of this in Portland when we lived in Portland. Portland is getting very, very expensive also. But there are requirements that if you're going to develop a property, if you're going to take a parking lot or an old building and tear it down and turn it into something new and fancy that's going to cost a whole lot more money, you have to set aside a certain amount of space for low-income people and keep that, you know, at a low rent rate, even though everybody around them is paying a much higher rent rate. That seems like a reasonable thing. For years, I've ridiculed is the wrong word, but I opposed, I guess, Howard Jarvis and his whole Prop 13 thing in California that said that whatever the property tax you're paying right now is, it will stay that until you sell your house. But it has hurt California in some ways, in as much as it's really dramatically cut local property tax revenues, particularly in rapidly growing cities or rapidly gentrifying cities. But the flip side of that is that people can keep their homes until the day they die, and then, you know, when they sell them, their heirs will, you know, make a fair amount of money because the property value has gone up so much. So, you know, I don't know that there's a perfect solution to this, Mark. I don't have one, but I think that an incremental step is rent control. New York City is famous for it, or at least requiring a certain percentage for low-income housing, and you were talking about the shoe store for small local family-owned businesses, that they get a different price than businesses that have, for example, an out-of-state like a chain, you know, McDonald's, that kind of thing. So,
well,
I don't know.
I know when Senator Sanders was in Seattle several years ago, invited by our council member Judy Nicastro, he talked about housing as a human right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the issues that Shama Sawant and our other council member, who unfortunately is retiring this year, Nick Licata, have been talking about for years, which is that, you know, the housing market in terms of residential housing, from their point of view, should really be taken out of the open market like that. There really should be some kinds of subsidies. I know on the federal level we have HUD, and, you know, here in Seattle, the Seattle Housing Authority, which tries to provide affordable housing for people. But it's disappearing so quickly in Seattle, any kind of affordable housing. And I think it's not just Seattle. Also, apparently there are 200 cities around the country that already have rent control. So you're probably right. It's going to have to be a state issue, and our own city officials are going to have to go to the state legislature and lobby them to change that law. Because
well, not just your city officials, you and all your friends. I mean, these are the kind of things that are amenable to grassroots pressure. And that's what you've got to do. Mark, I got to move along, but thanks for the call. It's an important topic. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's talk about what happened last night in this, they call it a debate, but it was not a debate. I mean, the closest it got to a debate was a small food fight, I guess you could call it, between Rand Paul and Chris Christie about the Fourth Amendment. Chris Christie was a federal prosecutor, started the day before 9/11 in New Jersey, and Rand Paul was an eye doctor. And clip 18 here. Well, actually, we start with clip 17. This is the closest thing to a debate that happened last night, and it was one of the few times during the entire evening when it wasn't Fox deciding to throw wedge issues out and Republicans responding to the wedge issues. This was instead an actual debate over actual principles. It lasted less than 2 minutes, but here, clip number 17 is the first piece of it. Here we go.
I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from innocent Americans. The Fourth Amendment was what we fought the revolution over. John Adams said it was the spark that led to our war for independence. And I'm proud of standing for the Bill of Rights, and I will continue to stand for the Bill of Rights.
And Megan, that's a completely ridiculous answer. I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from other people. How are you supposed to know, Megan?
Use the Fourth Amendment.
How are you supposed to?
Use the Fourth
No, I'll tell you how you
get a warrant.
Let me tell you something.
Get a judge to sign a warrant.
Senator.
Wait, Governor Christie, make your point.
Listen, Senator, when you're sitting in a subcommittee just blowing hot air about this, you can say things like that. When you're responsible for protecting the lives of the American people, then what you need to do is to make sure that you use the system the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, so that, Rand Paul doing his rabbit squirrel imitation again. I know, maybe it's just his hair that makes me think of that. Clip 18, here's the follow-on to that.
Here's the problem, Governor. You fundamentally misunderstand the Bill of Rights. Every time you did a case, you got a warrant from a judge. I'm talking about searches without warrants, indiscriminately of all Americans' records, and that's what I fought to end. I don't trust President Obama with our records. I know you gave him a big hug, and if you want to give him a big hug again, go right ahead.
And Senator Paul, the hugs that I remember are the hugs that I gave to the families who lost their people on September 11th. Those are the hugs I remember, and those had nothing to do with politics. Unlike what you're doing by cutting speeches on the floor of the Senate, then putting them on the internet within a half an hour to raise money for your campaign, and while still putting our country at risk. Our country at risk.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I see it evolved into a basically. But that was the essence of it. So, clip 23, Jim. This is Donald Trump, and I think that this was probably the most important moment of the entire evening. And nobody saw fit to comment on how this moment demonstrates, nobody other than Donald Trump, actually. I mean, he pointed out the absurdity of it by saying this proves we have a broken system. But nobody saw fit to point it out that this was a broken system brought to us by the United States Supreme Court in 1976 with the Buckley case, 77 with the First National Bank versus Bellotti, 2010 Citizens United last year with McCutcheon. Nobody pointed that out. Here's Donald Trump.
And you said recently, quote, when you give, they do whatever the hell you want them to do.
You better believe it.
So what specifically did they do?
If I ask them, if I need them, you know, most of the people on this stage I've given to, just so you understand, a lot of money. I will tell you that our system is broken. I give to many people. Before 2 months ago, I was a businessman. I give to everybody. When they call, I give. And you know what? When I need something from them, 2 years later, 3 years later, I call them. They are there for me.
So
and that's a broken system.
So
That's a broken system. You know, what is the old saying? From the mouths of children, or the mouths of babes, and village idiots. I mean, you know, there's. So, anyway, this here's Donald Trump being very proud. This is clip 28. Donald Trump being very proud of the fact that he could game the system with bankruptcy. Nobody, again, on the stage pointed out that first of all, that the average working person can't do that. Only tycoons can do that, because he never declared personal bankruptcy. He declared 4 different corporate bankruptcies. So, you know, nobody pointed that out. And perhaps more importantly, nobody pointed out that students who have student loan debts, you know, there are literally hundreds of thousands of people who are having their Social Security garnished because they hit the age of 65 and they still have student loan debt. Or they co-signed, more commonly, they co-signed for their children's student loan debt, and their kids can't get a job, and so now they're being held responsible by the bank, and their Social Security checks are being garnished. No wonder the rich are getting richer. The jobs are going abroad, and average workers are just plain old out of luck. I'm Thom Hartmann, and you just heard an excerpt from my book, Rebooting the American Dream.